Welcome to the Justice Wrap-Up Podcast. In the landmark 1963 case, Gideon versus Wainwright, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously ruled that every person accused of a crime in America must be provided a lawyer, regardless of their ability to pay. Each episode of the Justice Wrap-Up Podcast will explore the critical role public defenders play in addressing a wide range of issues facing marginalized communities with subject matter experts, key opinion leaders, and people impacted by the American criminal justice system. Listen as a community of advocates discuss their work to strengthen public defenders and transform public defense.
So, hey, everyone, it is really great to be here with another episode of Justice Wrap-Up. And September is National Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month. So we're spending this month's episode sitting down with two of our incredible Texas public defenders. In fact, two of my favorite people in the whole state of Texas, Gabe Bambara and Nicole Rivera, to discuss the disparities in justice within the Latinx community. And on this podcast, we often discuss how Black and Brown communities are disproportionately impacted by the criminal legal system in this country. So today we're going to spend time looking into the ways that public defenders help protect and defend Hispanic and Latinx communities in Texas specifically. And we're also going to discuss ways in which Hispanic and Latinx PDs are making historic waves down in the Lone Star State. So I'm really excited about this episode. I'm excited to introduce our two guests. And I'm going to just start. Nicole, let me just start with you. I want to just ask if you'll tell the audience a little bit about yourself and why you decided to become a public defender.
Good morning. Thank you, Rap. Yeah, so my name is Nicole Rivera. I started off my career in El Paso. I was there I worked with Gabe actually for the whole time I was there pretty much. Actually, funny story, Gabe was probably was the first person to befriend me, I think, criminal defense attorney, when I started my first day. The first day that I started on the job, one of the attorneys asked me to go to trial with him, and I was freaking out because it was my first day, and Gabe came in and met me and we talked and he calmed me down, and the trial didn't end up going, but that's a funny story. So, but I kind of always felt like I was going to go into defense. I never felt that I could be a prosecutor. I didn't know I wanted to be a trial attorney when I was in law school, but I knew that if I was going to go into criminal justice at all, that it would definitely be on the defense side, mainly because, growing up, I grew up in the lower valley of El Paso, and a lot of my friends were always in trouble. My grandfather was an alcoholic. He was in and out of jail. In fact, when I graduated, he got his felony DWI, and I helped him get through DWI court and probation. And so, based on just my life and the connections that I had, I always felt drawn to helping people in criminal defense. I was in El Paso for 10 years, and then I just recently left the El Paso Public Defender's Office for Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid to be the chief of an office. That we have 5 regional offices across the South Texas. And so I was the chief of one of the offices. Then I was promoted to the director of the Public Defender Division, so across all 5 offices. And then just most recently, 3 months ago, I was promoted to deputy director of all of TRALA, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. So that's now civil and the Public Defender Division. And so I'm learning all the civil world and all these grants. And so that's my story.
Yeah, Nicole, that's an amazing story. And Nicole, I met Nicole as a young public defender in Gideon's Promise. And as our audience knows, if they've been listening, our goal is to develop future leaders in public defense. Nicole, you are absolutely one of those leaders. I'm grateful to you for the work you're doing, for joining us today. Another one of those leaders who also I met as a new lawyer in Gideon's Promise, Gabe Bambara. Gabe, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you do this work.
Well, the only way I kind of make any sense is if you kind of know a little bit more about my family. So, I've been lucky to been born and raised in El Paso, Texas. The only time we ever left was to go to school. So when my parents divorced when I was around like 10, my mom decided, you know what? I always wanted to be a lawyer. She was thankful that she already had her undergrad, but she worked a little bit as a paralegal. And then we went off to law school to Thurgood Marshall School of Law in Houston, Texas, the house that Sweat built. And she did law school when I was in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. I remember still going over her cases with her. We had a lot of fun, and I kind of like learned, what the ruling of a case was and all that stuff. And it was just her and me at that point because my sister had gone off to college. Well, I always kind of wanted to be a public defender. And if I look back, it's like, oh, well, your first big theater part was Dill in To Kill a Mockingbird. It makes sense that you were a public defender. In middle school, when they had you write a book, you wrote a book about overturning a wrongful conviction. Okay, it makes sense that you're a public defender. So like I was kind of on this path. Now, when my mom got out of school, she needed a job, right? We were basically surviving 3 years purely on student loans. So she took a job as a prosecutor for a little while. And, I kind of needled her for that, but, she needed a job and, she was a very ethical prosecutor. After about 2 years, she joined the federal public defenders. So throughout college, I was seeing what my mom was doing, and I was kind of aiming towards that. And then my sister thought that she was going to be a doctor and then decided, no, I want to be a lawyer. So we actually applied for law school at the same time, me and my sister. And my sister's name is also Nicole. Her name is Nicole Bombara. And now, after working as a public defender with the El Paso State Public Defenders, she now works at the El Paso Federal Public Defenders, which is where my mom did work. And weirdly enough, they were given the same desk. My sister pulled out a drawer and there was a Post-it note with my mom's handwriting on it. So, everything's coming full circle. My mom also ended up marrying a coworker from the Federal Public Defenders. So now we're a family of 4 public defenders, which is just incredibly special. Like I cannot imagine where I would be without the support of knowing people who are going through the same thing. So that's a little bit of, I guess, a unique part of my story and why I'm here. And it's sometimes gets boiled down into a bumper sticker of why do you do this work? Because that's what we do. That's what we do in this family. So that's why I'm here.
Man, Gabe, I remember when I came to El Paso to speak once, and I met some of your public defender family, and it was immediately clear to me there's a whole lot of hope and inspiration in that family. So
thank you, Reb.
Grateful to you too. So listen, I'm going to jump right in, and Nicole, I want to start with you and just ask. We hear a lot about the criminal legal system and how it impacts mass incarceration and injustice. But specifically, I want to ask you how the criminal legal system impacts the Hispanic and Latinx community in Texas. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I talked to Gabe this morning about this, because I started off in El Paso and then now I'm in Central and South Texas. And so the way it impacts, I think, the Hispanic and Latinx community is different depending on where you're at, obviously. In South Texas, where I'm at right now, it's way more, I think, obvious and blatant. Governor Abbott just recently decided to have small rural counties on the border declare a disaster, and it's called Operation Lone Star. And if they declared a disaster in their county, they got funding to incarcerate basically anyone that's crossing over the river. And they're using the state criminal system to criminalize it. and they're charging them with criminal trespass. And Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, the organization that I work for, has been at the forefront of that. We were the first ones to take the cases. Nobody else would take them because it was a lot. I think we took like 1,500 cases the first month, and we only had like 4 lawyers, just, all of us scrambling to figure out where our clients were. They're putting them in post-conviction prisons. They're not putting them in the county jails. They're putting them in post-conviction units. So trying to talk to our clients was a lot harder. But that's probably the biggest obvious way that the criminal justice system in Texas is really affecting our people here.
And Gabe, anything to add to that? Is that your experience in El Paso as well?
I mean, it's a little different in El Paso because we haven't had that Operation Lone Star. We have more friendly, friendly sheriffs, friendly county commissioners, where it doesn't have that same, same radicalization of how to approach, human beings coming over here. So it's a little different, but I mean, I will tell you that because of being on the border, I feel like El Paso is one of the most militarized places. Like I drive, I'm lucky. I live about 3 miles from the courthouse. And one way to get there is to go down a couple of roads and then drive by the river. It's a beautiful drive, right? And, you can see, the mountains on one side, and UTEP, the seat of higher learning in El Paso, right, is right there. And on the other side, there's Juarez. And now, ever since even the Bush administration, there's been a fence there, right? And you kind of always see remnants of the government in your life. You see, not only, police department cars, you see sheriffs, you see border patrol, right? It's just a way of life. So it's kind of weird that that's just how it's been for so long, that we forget to see oh my God, this seems a very policed place, right? And it's not until you leave and you aren't constantly running into border patrol cars in traffic that you realize, oh, that is something that has been put onto my community.
And when you talk about border patrol, sometimes we hear them referred to as ICE agents, right? And particularly anyone who's been following what's been happening with Operation Lone Star has been hearing about some of the just inhumane behavior that ICE agents can exhibit when it comes to folks who are detained at the border. And I want to talk a little bit about rights of non-citizens. Obviously, in this country, when someone's liberty is on the line, one of the most important rights, if not the most important right, is the right to counsel, is the right to have a lawyer. And I wonder, Nicole, can you talk a little bit about whether non-citizens have that same right and what that means for them?
Yeah, I mean, in the state criminal system, they do, but going into immigration and ICE detention, they don't. It's not considered, I guess, because the only thing at risk to them is that they're going to get deported. They don't consider that a incarceration, or I think that the U.S. still has a hard time understanding that sometimes these people, their life is at stake if they go back. In fact, a lot of the people that are coming now are seeking asylum. But I think that it's just, there is also, I think, a lack of immigration attorneys. I think that system is completely overwhelmed, worse than even, our public defenders have. I think that, because we're dealing with it there's just not enough immigration attorneys, period, even if they were allowed to have counsel immediately. Gabe's wife actually is one of my favorite immigration attorneys. So I think he can speak on that a little bit more. She's amazing.
Yeah, so I say that.
Yeah, let me just say, I love the way Nicole threw the question to you. I'm just going to sit back and let you guys roll. Go ahead, Gabe.
No, I mean,
more about it.
I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be around a pack of people who get it and who want to help people. And one of the most foremost in my life with that is my wife, Jessica Miles. She is a kick-ass immigration attorney, and she's not originally from El Paso. She's from outside of Albuquerque, from Belen, right? Which Belen means Bethlehem. So like, how can you not love refugees if you're from Bethlehem? Like that's just how it's supposed to be, right? Come on, read your Bible. But seeing what she's fought here, right? And not only, fought normal immigration cases, but fought difficult, detained cases for people asking for asylum. And, I know the news only shows, people from Mexico asking for asylum, and there's this undercurrent that it's not a real question. Well, I can tell you that even in El Paso, my wife has had clients from all over, from the Middle East. Like I remember an Iraqi client, a Syrian client, clients from West Africa, really clients from all over the world, just asking the US to live up to what we say we are, right? To live up to try to be that shining beacon on the hill. So to see, just as a reflection of watching her work, the difficulties that people go through in this process, it's stark, right? And your question of, what rights do they have? Well, if you ask, the government, they have a right to a lawyer just like anybody else, but they have a right to pay for a lawyer, right? So it's not just that there aren't a lot of people, it's who can provide this work and still make a living, right? And that's when you get into, wonderful nonprofits that are also swamped, but, are doing their best, like DMRS, the Diocesan Migrant and Refugee Services. I always have trouble saying that word. You have Las Americas. You have people who are trying to help, but the system right now it's stacked against getting people, a quick, equitable resolution. And in my personal opinion, and I'm really only speaking for me here, if the US really wants to stand up and beat its chest about, being a protector of liberty, we need to provide those people lawyers for their asylum claims, because sometimes those asylum claims, you'll see things like people have to fill out a form in English when they don't speak English, or they're told, okay, well, we'll get you a translator, and it's a Spanish translator, but they might be from Southern Mexico and they speak native languages. They don't speak Spanish, right? It's stuff like that even for someone who is schooled in the criminal justice system where the deck is stacked against you, you look at this system and you're like, oh my God, this is a mess, right? Like they don't even have, an overworked public defender standing there for them. Sometimes it's just them, a judge in a language they don't know, and they're ordered deported. And that's a very sad reality that we don't often hear about, because everybody just says, oh, well, there's a crisis, but it's the cruelty and the things that need to be fixed at the border are not just kids in cages. It's not just people on horseback shoving back Haitians at Del Rio. It's the everyday difficulties of the system that are stopping in the way of us living up to our ideals. So that's what I see.
Yeah, you know what? Gabe brings up the language thing. Even me, I did not know that there were so many different dialects just in Mexico of of Spanish until Operation Lone Star. And I'll say that about 40% of our clients, because we've taken about 2,000 cases now, about 40% of them speak, it's called Kichi, I think is how you say it, which is an indigenous, it's like an indigenous dialect of Spanish. And if I mean, we're already, I think, lacking translators, good translators too, people that actually are saying what the person's saying, because that's a whole nother thing. I mean, you can have most translators are not that good, in my experience. I guess I'm just used to El Paso's translators. They were phenomenal, but you know, just finding regular translators and then finding translators for like all these different dialects, and then on top of that, I mean, attorneys. It's hard to find Spanish speaking attorneys. And so that relationship building with the clients, it's already hard as public defenders. Add to that language barriers. I mean, it's overwhelming.
So I want to pick up on that a little bit, because you said it's already hard as public defenders. We talk every month. I talk every chance I get about just how difficult it is to be a public defender. And yet, when you're working in El Paso or Trala, so often you're representing people who both have criminal cases, but also immigration consequences, which makes just being a public defender that much more difficult. Can you talk a little bit, and Nicole, let me start with you, a little bit about sort of what are the added difficulties of being a public defender representing populations of people who also have immigration consequences?
I'll say it's hard to not feel just hopeless and helpless. I mean, there's in instances where there's nothing you can do, right? Because just them coming over here, I mean, then they don't understand that, right? So, and then also just not, like Gabe said, the immigration system is so complicated and complex. I mean, me being on the border, born and raised on the border now, and I've always had clients that had immigration issues. I still have a hard time wrapping my head around everything. I mean, I try to know basic Padilla advice. I think that's what we all strive to do, is just basically how this criminal case could affect any immigration pathways that they may be seeking. But the thing is that, the people that are coming over here, especially like with Operation Lone Star, or anyone that comes over here and picks up a case, the issues that they care most about is their immigration case, right? That's why they don't, I mean, but they don't care. It's hard to get them to even talk about their criminal case, because all they want to talk about is their immigration status and how I'm going to help them on their immigration case. And I'm not an immigration attorney. Funding is even more limited for immigration, because even the federal funding for immigration has very strict, they're very restricted on how you can help immigration. You can only help true asylum seekers. And so, like even finding a nonprofit agency that could help them, that's limited. So just building the relationship with them when you can't talk about their immigration case, because you're not going to be their attorney when they get to ICE detention, is very difficult. And then I speak, very broken Spanish, admittedly. When I have to speak it regularly, and when I'm dealing with Operation Lone Star clients, it gets better. The more I speak it, the better I get. But, that is another barrier. And a lot of people, I think, that even know Spanish, it's kind of difficult for them, because there is no direct translation for a lot of the words that we use in the legal field, right? You have to explain the concept of the word, to these people. And so helping them understand just the entire system, that they're going to have to wait there, that they're going to have a detainer, that we can't get them out because they have a detainer, and then now they're going to go into ICE custody, and I don't know what's going to happen over there. I mean, literally, I feel like everything we tell them is, I don't know, and I don't know how we're going to help you, and we're probably not going to be able to do anything about that. I mean, it's hopeless.
Yeah, you have a client in front of you who is more concerned about their immigration case. And it's not like you're trying to win a difficult game, which is the criminal case. You're trying to win a game that you're not even allowed to play, right? You're trying to win a game separately by focusing on their criminal case. And it seems hopeless sometimes, and it's always difficult. And yeah, you're doing two things at once. And like one approach that has been taken, I'm very thankful by our offices. Our new public defender, Kelly Childress, got us a Padilla lawyer, right? That will help us, every single defendant who is an immigrant or, not from here, right, can get an immigration consult, right? That way we can kind of go through things, and, it can be really easy to just, go to TCDLA and look at a chart and say, okay, well, this crime means that you are deportable. This crime may be, right? But if you have somebody who's an expert on it, right, then you're not just talking about the generalities of like an assault family violence can get you deported, or, a DWI, maybe you're going to be okay. You can, really get into it and talk about, any forms of relief, right? Like, will this person be eligible for a stay of removal later, right? And that's stuff that you don't want criminal defense attorneys really doing, because we're not going to get it right. We might know just enough to really give overconfident advice to our clients. So it's nice to have this this kind of new model, and we're implementing it, but it's very complicated, and you can go in with a lot of knowledge and still get it wrong. So it's very trepidatious to be practicing this along the border.
I think also the thing that complicates it is it changes so rapidly. So another thing I tell my clients is this could be the law today, and literally tomorrow, this could not affect your immigration status maybe today, but tomorrow I can't tell you. I mean, it changes so rapidly and so drastically, and it depends on the administration, that really any criminal case that they get could one day affect them.
Yeah, and Gabe, you mentioned a Padilla lawyer, and just to let our audience know, Padilla versus Kentucky is a Supreme Court case that says that lawyers have an obligation. Actually, effective assistance of counsel requires that criminal defense lawyers be skilled and knowledgeable enough to advise people about immigration consequences that flow from their criminal case. And despite Padilla, overwhelmed public defenders, right? Not because they're not phenomenal and heroic, but because they're overwhelmed, because the law is so complex, because, as Nicole says, it changes almost daily. Public defenders are falling short of that obligation every day. And clearly, if we cared about the Sixth Amendment right to counsel, we would be providing resources and training and defenders to live up to that promise. One other thing, and I'm looking at the time, and this is such a fascinating conversation. We're not close to the end. And I do want to ask one question before I talk to you, Gabe, about what's happening in El Paso. And Nicole, I just want to ask this question. You talked about sort of the situation people find themselves in when they enter this country. They're innocent, but they're caught up in this legal system. And I think maybe what's implied, but you didn't speak to explicitly, is the impact that has on family and children. We're talking about people who might care less about their criminal case than being deported, because oftentimes that means they're pulled away from their children who need them and depend on them. Is that right, Nicole?
Yes, and actually, with Operation Lone Star, they're only arresting men. We actually have a writ based on the inequities of that, right? They're only prosecuting men. And so what's happening is that these families are crossing. They probably spent a lot of money to Coyote to help them cross the river. And then they're encountering probably an ICE agent is what we think, that's directing them into a privately owned land. And then they're separating the women and the children from the men. And the men are getting arrested, and they don't know what's happening to the women and the children. Maybe they're making it all the way, but definitely they're being separated from their families. They don't have phone numbers. They don't have phones on them. They have no money. And we have yet to find out what's going to happen. I mean, and that's another thing. These people, when we talk to them, they're so desperate, and it's devastating. They don't know where their families are at and when they're going to see them again. And that's another hard part of representing them. I mean, just trying to get through basic information because they're overwhelmed by emotion. They don't know what's happening to their families.
Oh, and I have to say, I mean, as public defenders, just having to bear witness to such tragedy every day does such a number on your spirit and your soul. I mean, as a father, a husband, the idea of being taken from my wife and kids and not knowing what's going to happen to them is heartbreaking. But you don't have to be a father or a husband you just have to have a heart to recognize that this is just not who we pretend to be in America. I mean, thank goodness for the work y'all are doing, and I appreciate it because it's so hard. Gabe, I want to actually pivot to El Paso, because while this work is hard and our listeners can listen and say, this is discouraging, why would anyone be a public defender? It seems like you're Sisyphus. Every time you take a step forward, you take a step back. But while every day public defenders can feel beaten down and overwhelmed, it's why Gideon's Promise exists. We also know that collectively public defenders every day are making a huge difference. And just one of many examples in El Paso. El Paso has currently been experiencing an influx of case dismissals where public defenders are working to get cases out of the system that shouldn't be in that system, spearheaded by the Public Defender's Office, giving lots of families, lots of children, lots of people their loved ones back. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, Gabe, because that's really a remarkable story.
Oh, most definitely, Rep. I mean, this is the wonderful thing about getting to be a public defender, right? As a private defense attorney, which I was before I joined the office, you feel like you're on an island trying to help your clients, right? But when you join a public defender's office, you're not just a finger, you're a fist, right? So what we were able to do is we looked at all these cases that had no movement on them. They were stuck in pre-indictment, right? Now, that might sound great. Oh, the case has no movement. Most of those people, right, were not in jail. The overwhelming majority were not in jail. They were just checking in with PR bond. But some of the people were checking in with PR bond and let's say it was a DWI, maybe they had a breathalyzer that they had to blow into every time they drove on their car, but their case hadn't moved. So we started a petition for those cases, right, under 3201 of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, saying, hey, they haven't done any movement on these cases. We're asking the court to dismiss them. Now, that doesn't mean that the DA's office cannot, they keep saying go back and refile the case, but the case hasn't been filed. So that doesn't mean they can't file the case. And in some of those cases, I think the estimate was like of the 1,000 cases that they did it, they vowed to file on 400 of those cases. But those are 600 cases that people were dealing with restrictions on their liberty. Whether it be they can't cross over to Juarez, right, because they're on PR bond. They can't leave the county. They can't go to New Mexico. They can't go to Las Cruces, which is the closest nearby American city to El Paso. They were maybe worried about applying for a job because they had this arrest on their record that's still pending. Luckily, we were able to get a whole bunch of those cases dismissed, but it was really good to see because we had all these cases, we could do this, right? And the overwhelming joy of it afterwards was that the private bar started to get involved, right? And I started to see private attorneys put in 3201 motions. So it's kind of the way that the defense bar is supposed to work, right? You find something that works and you hammer it, right? And you help out your clients. So it's a really good thing to get to see the joys of getting to be a public defender and getting to fight these cases, not just one at a time, but systemically. And, that's a big part of what Gideon's Promise is. How do you make change in a system that sorely needs it? And this was a wonderful example, and I'm very thankful that we were able to get that done.
So that's a great segue to my next question, because I wanted to ask you about, you're both graduates of Gideon's Promise, you're alumni, you train with Gideon's Promise. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how Gideon's Promise has impacted your career, your work, your vision as a public defender. Nicole, let's start with you.
I mean, tremendously. I think that one of the things that Gideon's Promise gives you is exactly what Gabe was talking about. I think when you're, not every public defender's office is supportive, or I think that a lot of people struggle in their offices with maybe not having the leadership and guidance all the time. But one of the things that was amazing about Gideon's Promise was that you have this community of people that are going through the same thing, and sometimes a lot worse than you in other states, right? I think that was one of the things that stood out to me, was that no matter where you're at, being a public defender is difficult, but when you go to Gideon's Promise for the 2 weeks and you spend time with people that are in Louisiana, that was one that stood out to me. I mean, I was just like, if they have the strength to do this, and they have the strength to I mean, we heard amazing stories. I remember Cass talking about, some of the things that he was doing in New Orleans. It's inspiring. It gives you the strength to go back to your office and continue to do this difficult work. And it continues to reinvigorate me every time I'm around the public defenders in Gideon's Promise. Now, me and Gabe have the privilege of being faculty for Gideon's Promise in Texas, and we call it the Future Indigent Defense Leaders. It's just also just good to be around people that are doing good work, right? Especially now for me, I'm in systems that, horrible sadistic stuff is going on, and you forget that there's good human beings out there sometimes, and just being around that many good people doing good work that just care, it's enough to keep us going.
Thanks for that, Nicole. Gabe, how about you?
I got to tell you, it's been transformative to be part of Gideon's Promise. I originally did not want to go. I did not want to take 2 weeks away from my cases and all my clients, but it's been wonderful. And the people, it gives you another family. It gives you another group of people who understand it. Because when you get up close and see the realities of the criminal justice system, and you think that it isn't right, you feel like you're taking crazy pills. So it's very necessary to have other people around you who are like, no, you're not wrong. This isn't the way it's supposed to be, and we need to fight to change it. And while not every single person who goes through the Gideon's Promise program is able to stay in public defense, I have seen tremendous examples of people on the outside who continue to live up to those values. Nicole mentioned Cass. Cass is now going to be working as a criminal defense attorney in Martha's Vineyard. Who do you think was lining up to volunteer when DeSantis sent all those Venezuelan migrants to Martha's Vineyard? Cass was, right? Portia Brown's running to be a judge in Houston. George Dungan, also class of 2015, he's running to be part of the Nebraska state legislature, right? It's a movement of people who are there and ready to help. So I am very thankful for the time that I've been able to spend with Gideon's Promise, but most of all, to help my teaching and to help my training of new lawyers, because that's kind of like the part of my career that I'm in, right? I've been doing this almost 12 years. I joke that if you do a rewatch of Scrubs 8 to 12 years into your career, you're no longer JD, you're now Dr. Cox. And that's how I feel. Like now people are coming to me with problems and you're trying to train them as to how to deal with them and how to become a public defender and how to stay a public defender. And this community has been incredibly helpful in allowing me to retain that, to really take it into me and make it part of me. And then also to try to give that back to some of the people who have less experience.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gabe. I actually knew Cass was setting up practice in Martha's Vineyard. I did not know he was among the volunteers to help the folks that were sent by plane to Martha's Vineyard. I'm not a bit surprised, and it really does sort of come full circle.
Right. Yeah.
So Nicole mentioned the Future Indigent Defense Leaders Program. Gideon's Promise has partnered with the Texas Indigent Defense Commission, the Harris County Public Defender's Office, and the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association to train, mentor public defenders and court-appointed counsel all across Texas in this model. You two are faculty members in that initiative. Could you talk a little bit, Nicole, about what this effort means for Texas, and what do you think it does for the lawyers that are going through the program?
Absolutely. Like Gabe said, I think, we're both at that time in our careers where that's what we're focusing on, right? It's very important to both of us that we keep public defenders, in this profession as long as possible. And I think that, it can be one of the things. I mean, it's just the cost. I think it can be very expensive on public defender offices to send our attorneys out of state, right? We didn't have anything within the state that was geared towards indigent defense, right? TCDLA is amazing. They provide a lot of trainings, and they provide a lot of free trainings for public defenders, but we didn't have anything that was, this long, like 2 weeks of just being immersed into training. And I think it's important. Most of the public defender's office also in Texas also, we're so overwhelmed with cases and understaffed that providing some type of training and onboarding, it's really difficult. I've heard stories about PDS, I think from URAP, that they get to onboard their attorneys for like a month or something without giving them cases in their name. And I'm like,
2 months, Nicole.
2 months. Okay. See, I mean, I would, that's the gold standard, right? And I've always said that I would love to be in a place where all of our offices can do something like that. But in the meantime, we needed something, right? And I think that it's going to be very important to the success of indigent defense in Texas that we have this program for 2 weeks where public defenders and court-appointed lawyers can focus on just training and getting the skills that they need to stay in this work for a very long time.
Gabe, anything to add to that?
Shout out to the appointed counsel. That's how I started my career, not as a public defender, but as what I was calling a private public defender. So basically public defender work, but no health insurance. That's how I always thought of it, right? But the wonderful part of this program in Fiddle is that you don't just get hopefully a Gideon's lawyer if you're lucky enough to have an established office representing you, like Dallas or El Paso, or an emerging office like Austin or San Antonio or Houston, right? You should get a Gideon's lawyer, even if you're, in San Angelo, even if you're in the Valley, even if you're in Montgomery County or Galveston, right? And to see the young lawyers who want to do the right thing and want to change the system, it's a wonderful thing to get to be a part of. So also just seeing people who are so energetic and ready to go, it gives you life. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that because you've been doing this for 15 years and seeing all of us come through, or even longer.
Yeah,
but it's tremendous.
So in our last couple minutes, I'm going to ask you to just finish with one message. I'll start with you, Nicole. You got first word, so Gabe, you will get last word. But if you had one message to leave our audience during this month where we celebrate Hispanic and Latinx history in this country, what would that message be, Nicole?
I struggled with this one, right? Like if I had one message, I mean, I think it would be to Latinx, specifically people that are thinking of going into the criminal justice system or criminal justice work, right? We need more Latinx public defenders, I think, because of the state of our immigration and our policies and what people from Latinx countries are going through. Our system is overwhelmed. And I think that this, we talk about it all the time, that this is the new Jim Crow, that, this is civil rights. This is the forefront of it. And if you're thinking at all about how you want to make a difference, and if you want to do work that is meaningful, this is the work, and you feel like you're making a difference every day.
Thank you, Nicole. Gabe, how about you? If you had one message to give as we wrap up, what would it be?
I mean, in my thought always when we're talking about, I guess like Latino Heritage Month is just to point out that we're all so different. I mean, I'm from here. I'm from El Paso, right? My mom's Mexican, my dad's Venezuelan. That might mean that both of us eat rice and beans, but we eat different rice and beans, right? It's completely different, and while we're all united, we all have different experiences, whether we've been here for 3 generations or whether we just got here. So I guess my message is that to embrace that sameness that we all have, right? And to embrace, the Latinness, but also the Americanness that we're all trying to achieve for our families and for our futures. And, just to kind of celebrate who we get to be. And for me, that means defending my community. That means, getting to defend cases where the stop happened on a drive that I've done thousands of times, right? That I'm blessed to represent my community against a system that I don't always feel is fair against them. So, that's how I represent my pride in my Americanness. And I'm hopeful that more people, especially young attorneys, will look at the landscape and say, you know what, this is a job where I can do well by doing good. And that's something that I'm very blessed to have found in my life. And I hope that more people can come and join me in this fight.
Wow. So Nicole, Gabe, thank you both. I mean, you two, you give me hope. You really do. Like getting on this podcast with you this morning, I was excited, but I leave even more inspired and hopeful than I thought I would be. I don't know why, because every time I'm around you guys and your colleagues, I feel this way. But thank you. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for joining this podcast. Thank you for sharing this wisdom. And let me just say, as Illy would say, in true form or fashion, this is Jonathan wrapping it up.
Thank you for listening to the Justice Wrap Up. To continue learning more about how essential public defenders are in criminal justice reform, please visit our website at gideonspromise.org to make a donation. Join us each month wherever you cast. Subscribe to our newsletter, share your thoughts, and let us know what's on your mind.